time.
Mr. Speaker, as winter approaches and temperatures begin to drop, Canadians in my riding up north and across the country are thankful that they're not subject to the NDP's massive carbon tax. The NDP's carbon tax scheme would drastically raise the price of electricity, causing families to use more of their hard-earned money to heat their homes. The NDP's regressive $21 billion carbon tax is reckless and unfair to hardworking families who simply want to keep their homes warm and comfortable during the fall and winter months. I am proud that our government has continually lowered taxes for Canadian families and has created important initiatives that help Canadians save money, like the home renovation tax credit, which saves Canadians tax dollars and decreases their home heating costs. The NDP should be ashamed of their sneaky carbon tax. Call it a carbon budget, and that will take money directly from the pockets of hard-working Canadians.
Oral questions, questions orales. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, 300,000 more Canadians unemployed today than before the crash of 2008. A record $50 billion trade deficit, the highest household debt in Canadian history. The Conservative solution? Send the Finance Minister to lecture business leaders. But Canadian business leaders are voting with their wallets and holding off on new investment. They're sitting on over $500 billion in dead money. When will the Conservatives stop lecturing Canadians on the economy and start listening?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, of course, Mr. Speaker, as I've said repeatedly, we all know that there are great challenges in the world economy that affect this country. That said, Canada's economic performance continues to be far superior to that of most other developed countries. The number of jobs is up by more than 750,000. Investment is up, exports are up, and growth is up, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we're going to make sure that we resist any ideas for carbon taxes, for tax increases, for shutting down industries, for blocking trade. This government is committed to the growth and prosperity of Canada.
Our priority is jobs. Their priority is making up stuff about the NDP. Monsieur le Président, depuis 2006, les conservateurs ont gaspillé 55 milliards en cadeaux aux grandes entreprises via des réductions d'impôts. Le Premier ministre jurait que ça créerait de l'emploi, mais le véritable résultat, c'est que les entreprises canadiennes laissent dormir $1,5 billion dans leur coffre. Puisque même son ministre des Finances a admis que ces baisses d'impôts coopératifs n'ont pas entraîné les investissements à la création d'emplois escomptés, que va faire le Premier ministre pour réveiller tout cet argent qui dort?
Voilà. Le Premier ministre.
Alors, Monsieur le Président, encore aujourd'hui, une autre organisation internationale dit que le Canada est un des meilleurs endroits du monde de faire des investissements. C'est la raison pour laquelle les investissements augmentent, la création d'emplois augmente, la croissance économique augmente. And there, Mr. Speaker, is obviously more to do, but we're moving in the right direction. But let me just say this, Mr. Speaker, I don't have to make up anything about the NDP. I got it here in black and white. Black and white, their platform from the last election, their little table at the end, cap and trade revenues by year, $21 billion. Be part of it.
Opposition.
After 7 years of Conservative corporate tax cuts, their Finance Minister has nothing better
to offer. Order. I know this is a Wednesday. Order. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Conservatives have nothing better to offer than more lectures to Canadian business. But despite their finger-wagging, Canadian businesses are sitting on over $500 billion in dead money. Even the Association of Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters has said that Conservative corporate tax cuts have had, and I quote, little observable impact on new investment in Canada. What will it take for this Conservative government to finally change course?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, under our government, our record of growth continues to be superior. Taxes are down not just for business, they're down for individuals, they're down for families. In every case, the NDP voted against those tax cuts. We have voted for them. Mr. Speaker, the manufacturing sector can speak for itself. Let me read you what the president of Patriot Forge, a manufacturing company in southwestern Ontario, just said. The higher taxes proposed by the NDP will make it much more difficult for our Canadian plants to compete.
The honourable member for Parkdale High Park.
Monsieur le Président, c'est dans ce cadre économique conservateur, improvisé et incertain que les dirigeants de compagnies pétrolières demandent au gouvernement de mettre en place des règles claires en ce qui concerne la propriété des sables bitumineux, ce que les conservateurs ne font pas. Ils poursuivent plutôt la discussion derrière des portes closes dans le dossier Nexon. Les conservateurs vont-ils écouter les inquiétudes des Canadiens et des entrepreneurs plutôt que les ignorer?
Honourable Ministre de l'Industrie.
Monsieur le Président, notre gouvernement gérera toujours dans les meilleurs intérêts du pays et comme j'ai dit, comme on le répète, cette transaction-là sera examinée avec le plus grand soin, Monsieur le Président. Et je dois rappeler aussi à ma collègue que la loi sur l'investissement au Canada dispose de provisions pour protéger les intérêts nationaux. Ça, c'est des provisions contre lesquelles le NPD a voté. Mais si elle cite les dirigeants des compagnies, je peux vous dire une chose, Monsieur le Président, les dirigeants des compagnies peuvent être certains qu'on ne les mettra pas en dehors des affaires, en adoptant un cadre de taxe qui est trop haut, Monsieur le Président, et en faisant en sorte d'être contre toute forme d'échange et d'investissement au pays.
The honourable member for Parkdale High Park.
Mr. Speaker, you know that when oil industry executives have more concern about Canadian sovereignty than the government, you know there's a problem. People are concerned about opening the floodgates to other foreign governments buying up our natural resources. And no matter how much the Conservatives furrow their brows and point to their shoelaces, if they refuse to act, we'll have the slow hollowing out and the nationalization of our resource sector by other governments. What's it going to take to get one of these ministers up on their feet, listening to the real concerns of Canadians?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister of Industry.
Well, Mr. Speaker, when you speak with business community, when you speak with entrepreneurs, the one who create the wealth in this country, they are very afraid about the proposed NDP carbon tax. $21 billion of revenue. Mr. Speaker, they are afraid about their approach, anti-trade, anti-business, anti-investment, Mr. Canada. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, anyway, I speak about Canada here. I'm proud to be Canadian, and I can say, Mr. Speaker, that everything that will be done on this side of the House will be in the best interest of
Canada. The honourable member for Vancouver Quadra.
To Know Week, and we're supposed to be focusing on the benefits of transparency and accountability. Remember those words? That the Conservative government is marking it by hiding cuts from the Parliamentary Budget Officer and by hiding the true costs of the F-35. And now the Prime Minister actually has a secret cabinet committee on cuts that is being chaired by the Minister of Gazebos himself. So when will Canadians get access to the information that they have paid for with their tax dollars?
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
I'm not quite sure what the Honourable Member is referring to. I'm chairing a new Cabinet Committee which was announced by a news release by the Prime Minister's office, Mr. Speaker. That's not exactly the way to be secretive, I assure the Honourable Member. Of course, Mr. Speaker, of course we believe that the budget officer should concentrate his time and his energy examining how Parliament and how the Government of Canada spends its money, not fretting about money we have not spent. And that's the fundamental difference. But of course, we will, of course, be accountable to Parliament on all of those expenditures.
The honourable member for Vancouver Quadra.
Well, let's try it again, Mr. Speaker.
Order. Order. The honourable member for Vancouver Quadra.
He obviously didn't understand the first time. C'est la semaine du droit d'information gouvernementale, c'est-à-dire la transparence. Toutefois, le gouvernement a plutôt choisi de marquer cette semaine par le secret. Il refuse de fournir l'information sur les coupures au directeur du budget parlementaire et il refuse de fournir les vrais coûts de F-35. Quand les Canadiens auront-ils accès aux informations auxquelles leurs taxes leur donnent droit?
Honorable Président du Conseil de Trésor.
J'ai déjà dit, Monsieur le Président, nous continuerons de faire rapport au Parlement par les moyens habituels, y compris les budgets des dépenses, les rapports financiers trimestriels et l'étude des comptes publics, Monsieur le Président. Nous sommes d'avoir de la comptabilité ici, là, dans notre chambre. We continue to have that kind of accountability. It's the normal course to report on these things, and we will continue to do so because we believe we are spending money on the benefit of the people of Canada, and we will continue to do so.
The honourable member for Vancouver Quadra.
Mr. Speaker, talking about being kept in the dark, Canadians are being kept in the dark about the Nexon deal, and we need to know exactly what is being considered in the proposed deal and what percentage of foreign ownership will this government allow in Canada's resource sector? Canadians want to know. And why has the Prime Minister not been answering these questions? Why is the Prime Minister refusing to be transparent to taxpayers?
The Honourable Minister of Industry.
Mr. Speaker, as I said, we will always act in the best interest of this country. And the Liberal Party, Mr. Canada, never turned any single deal in this country, Mr. Speaker. And once again, I'm passionate here, Mr. Speaker, because, you know, these guys try to say that we are not working in the interest of this country, but I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, this transaction will be scrutinized very closely.
Monsieur le Président, hier, la ministre des Ressources humaines est allée d'un commentaire révélateur du mépris de ce gouvernement envers les gens qui, contre leur gré, ont perdu leur emploi. Elle a dit, et je cite, « S'ils ont un emploi, ils gagneront toujours plus que s'ils n'en avaient pas. » Le ministre s'en fout que les gens perdent 50% de leurs prestations s'ils comblent la perte de leurs revenus avec un emploi d'1 ou 2 jours par semaine. Tant qu'ils gagnent plus que 0, c'est pas mon problème, dit la ministre. Est-ce là toute la considération qu'a la ministre pour les chômeurs?
Honorable ministre des Ressources humaines.
Oui, Monsieur le Président. Nous voulons aider des gens à trouver des emplois lorsqu'ils ont perdu le sien. Et nous allons le faire, mais nous allons les encourager et leur donner leur argent lorsqu'ils travaillent pendant la prestation. Par exemple, Tracy, qui gagne 264 $ par semaine de AE, travaille pendant 3 jours à 12 $ par heure. Auparavant, elle aurait pu garder 106 $. Maintenant, elle gardera 144 $. Nous sommes là pour aider nos chômeurs.
L'honorable député de Gaspésie-le-Madeleine.
C'est bien ce qu'on pensait. Ils n'ont aucune considération pour les chômeurs. Le président de la conférence régionale des élus de ma région à Gaspésie l'a dit. 80% de l'économie de ma région repose sur les travailleurs saisonniers. Puis la réforme de la ministre, c'est quoi? Elle propose que les pêcheurs rivière-renard devraient pêcher à l'année longue. Il n'y a pas assez de poissons dans la mer pour pêcher si long que ça, Monsieur le Président. Elle s'attaque aux restaurateurs de Percé. Ils devraient rester ouverts l'année aussi. Il n'y a pas de touristes l'hiver à Percé, Monsieur le Président. Elle s'attaque aux travailleurs forestiers de Chandler. Ces gens-là, ils n'auront pas le choix de quitter la région. Pourquoi les conservateurs s'acharnent à Gaspésie?
Honorable ministre des Ressources humaines.
Monsieur le Président, c'est tout à fait faux. Lorsque les chômeurs ne peuvent pas trouver un autre emploi, ils sont des travailleurs saisonniers, s'ils ne peuvent pas trouver un autre emploi, l'assurance-emploi sera là pour eux, comme toujours. Mais s'ils peuvent trouver du travail, ils s'en porteront mieux lorsqu'ils travaillent que non.
L'honorable député d'Acadie-Bathurst.
Incroyable parce qu'on entend, Monsieur le Président. C'est pas juste en Gaspésie qu'on attaque. 2 de mes concitoyens, Alain Cormier et sa conjointe, qui travaillent au village historique acadien, ont appris que le projet pilote, qui ajoute 5 semaines de chômage dans leur zone, a fini le 15 septembre 2012. Ça veut dire que lui et sa conjointe n'auront pas une maudite scène noire pour payer leurs factures au printemps de 2013. Puis, ce mode toute seule, là, tous les travailleurs saisonniers vont subir le même sort. Pourquoi que la ministre ne poursuit pas le projet pilote au printemps, pas une maudite somme noire pour payer leur paiement?
J'ai entendu un mot en français qui, je pense, n'est pas acceptable. J'espère que après la période de questions, l'honorable député va clarifier. L'honorable ministre des Ressources humaines.
Alors, Monsieur le Président, ce projet pilote de 5 semaines de plus était mis en place pour aider des gens pendant la récession mondiale. Nous savions que c'était encore plus difficile pour des gens à trouver d'autres emplois. C'est pourquoi nous avons élargi les prestations, mais c'est plus beau maintenant. Alors, le programme était toujours destiné à être fermé à ce temps maintenant.
The honourable member for St. John South Mount Pearl.
Mr. Speaker, here's a scenario faced by a new mother in my riding. I spoke with her last night. Doreen is a French teacher who's been on maternity benefits since January. 2 weeks ago, she was offered a part-time job of 4 hours a week teaching French from her computer at her home. But with the new EI changes, she'll lose 50 cents on the dollar. And by the time taxes are removed from her paycheck, she'll barely have enough to pay for diapers. She won't have enough to pay for diapers. Mr. Speaker, why is this government punishing new mothers?
Mr. Speaker, right across this great country of ours, we have, despite high unemployment rates in some areas, shortages of skills and labor. And in many cases, the EI system has discouraged people from working. The changes we're making are going to help most Canadians be better off when they work than when they don't. That's the objective, Mr. Speaker, because we need all the skills and talented work that we can possibly get.
Parce que la ministre ne semble pas comprendre, on va y expliquer ce qui ne fonctionne pas. Le maire de Saint-Siméon dans Charlevoix a écrit au premier ministre. Il a parlé, je le cite, d'une grave menace pour la survie de nos petites communautés rurales. Communautés qui vivent de l'industrie saisonnière. Quelle est la réponse de la ministre? Pour ce maire qui craint de voir 40% de ses résidents quitter la région? De l'indifférence. La ministre va-t-elle finalement entendre raison et reculer? Ou elle se lave les mains sur le dos de nos régions?
Alors, Monsieur le Président, c'est évident que le membre a mal compris ce qu'on fait. Nous encourageons des gens à travailler. Monsieur le Président, c'est notre gouvernement qui a introduit les aides pour les chômeurs, pour les aider à chercher des emplois, à trouver des emplois, à se présenter pour des entrevues. Monsieur le Président, nous voulons aider des gens à travailler, nous voulons les encourager à travailler, pas les empêcher, et malheureusement, l'NPD a voté contre toutes nos initiatives.
The honourable member for Davenport.
Well, it's clear, Mr. Speaker, the minister either doesn't get it or just doesn't care. Now, let's take the $5 billion TV and film industry, which employs about 130,000 people on a project-by-project basis. Now, in between projects, workers are out there hustling for their next gig. That's how this works. Force them from their field, and you know what you've just done? You've ripped the muscle right out of the sector. So why is this government weakening the Canadian arts and culture industries just at the time when they are becoming world leaders?
Mr. Speaker, no government has done more to support our arts and film community, thanks to the very fine work of our minister. Mr. Speaker, we need to support those individuals in their search. We're going to help them look for those jobs in their field. We're going to help them look for those.
Order. There's far too much cross-conversations going on. The Honourable Minister of Human Resources.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was having problems hearing myself over that noise. But, Mr. Speaker, we have to support these workers in their efforts to find a new job within their skill range, within their region. And that's important, Mr. Speaker. We're not asking people to move cross-country, but we are supporting them in their search, in their job, in their specifications, in their region. Too bad the NDP didn't support us in that.
Honourable member for Burnaby Douglas.
Speaker, well, frankly, British Columbians are also concerned about these cuts to EI, and especially how they're going to affect young people. Youth unemployment is about 15%, and thousands of young folks have simply given up hope and stopped looking for work. And today there are 300,000 more Canadians unemployed than before the recession. So I'm asking, how can further cuts to EI help young people find jobs?
The Honourable Minister of Human Resources.
Well, in fact, Mr. Speaker, there are over 770,000 net new jobs created in this country since the recession. We're very proud of that. And part of that success comes from our investments in our Canada Youth Employment Strategy, things like Canada Summer Jobs, the extra $50 million that was in this year's budget to help young people who are facing barriers to employment get the experience that they need to get the skills and the jobs today and tomorrow. Mr. Speaker, we're helping those young people. Unfortunately, once again, big surprise, the NDP voted against those efforts to help our young people.
Member for British Columbia, Southern Interior.
Many of these 700,000 jobs are good, well-paying jobs that people can support themselves with. Year after year, BC fruit growers in my region depend on seasonal works to help them bring in the harvest. With the new EI changes, these seasonal workers may not be there come harvest time. Fruit growers already are facing competition from low-cost fruit imports being dumped in our market. Now they are facing a destabilized work pool. Why didn't this minister consult with fruit growers in my region before she made these changes?
All right. The Honourable Minister of Human Resources.
Coming from the part of Canada that I do, Haldimand, Norfolk, that is the home of the Farms program, and we recognize how important agricultural workers are to our economy. That's why the Minister of Agriculture and I have met with leaders in the agricultural sector who depend on foreign workers. We've assured them there will be no changes to this program. We recognize their need. We also recognize the need to give Canadians a first chance at these jobs. When Canadians can't fill those jobs, then obviously our farmers are going to be able to rely on us to keep these programs in place and help them get the labor that they need for their farming.
For Hamilton Mountain.
The minister simply isn't listening. What all of these examples show is that the Conservatives are not being honest with Canadians. Their own numbers contradict them. The government originally budgeted $130 million for 1 year under the old Working While Unclaimed Pilot project. Now they're budgeting $74 million over 2 years for the next version. Less money over longer time, fewer people are going to benefit. Will the minister now stand up and explain why they're punishing unemployed, part-time and low-wage Canadians?
The Honourable Minister of Human Resources.
I mentioned the 770,000 net new jobs that have been created. Over 90% of those are very high quality, high paying jobs. We're proud of our contributions to that. But Mr. Speaker, our priority for this country is job creation and the growth of our economy. To do that, we need to have all the talents and skills of Canadians at work. When there are jobs available within the skill range and they're in a given area and there are people on EI with those skills, we're going to help connect those workers with those jobs. That's better for the employers, but it's certainly better for the workers and for their families.
The member for Wascana.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians are struggling with the proposed foreign buyout of Nexen because the rules aren't clear and the process is a secret black box. After the potash controversy 2 years ago, the Conservatives promised better definitions and a more open procedure. They've wasted all that time, and now a flood of takeovers is on the horizon. With respect to the Nexen deal, does net benefit include some Canadian directors added to the board of CNUC and the board of Nexen retaining a majority of Canadian directors? Is that assured?
And the Honourable Minister of Industry.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's not true at all. First of all, I must remind my colleague that Investment Canada Act process has provision to protect national security. This is an improvement that we put there. We improved transparency. We set up a dispute resolution clause. And I must remind Mr. Speaker that the Liberal Party never turned down any single deal in the past, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Humber, St. Barbe, Bévert.
The minister insists that Canadians concerned about the government.
Order. Order. The Honourable Member for Humber, St. Barbe, Bévert.
We'll do that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister insists that Canadians concerned about the government's EI reforms just need to get a, quote, education in them before they speak out. Well, Mr. Speaker, Irene from my riding got her education. She lost her full-time job. She lost her job as a full-time nurse's assistant and was picking up part-time shifts and receiving EI while looking for full-time work. Irene got her education in EI reform, and her textbook was her pay stub. $65 a week less for working now on claim than under the previous program. Is this encouraging anything? Does the minister understand that she's the one that needs to go back to school at
The Honourable Minister of Human Resources.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we're working to help people who have lost their job through no fault of their own with new jobs, with our increase in job alerts, making sure that temporary foreign employers or people who want to bring in temporary foreign workers are connected with the unemployment system so they can access Canadians and give them first shot at jobs. But let's look at Bill. Under the new system, could be making $330 a week on EI, 3 shifts of work at $15 an hour. Under the old system, he'd have got to keep $132. Mr. Speaker, on the new system, he'll be able to keep $225. That's better. He's working. His family's better.
L'honorable député de Bourassa.
Monsieur le Président, il y a des limites à répondre avec des niaiseries comme la ministre fait présentement. À un moment donné, là, la vérité a ses droits. L'ancien système, c'est qu'on pouvait ou bien conserver 40 ou le 75 $. À partir de maintenant, on enlève dès le premier dollar 50 %. Ça veut dire qu'on perd davantage et la ministre encourage le travail au noir. Est-ce que c'est de l'incompétence ou c'est de l'ignorance? Est-ce qu'on peut l'aider parce qu'on ne connaît pas son dossier?
Oui. L'honorable ministre des Ressources humaines.
Monsieur le Président, hier, j'ai dit exactement ça. J'ai recité exactement ces chiffres. Ils m'ont nommé menteuse. Monsieur le Président, c'est le fait. Si, sous l'ancien régime, on pouvait travailler pour à peu près un jour, 75 $, un jour. Après ça, chaque dollar gagné en travaillant aurait été retrouvé par le système d'assurance-emploi. Maintenant, si on travaille plus qu'un jour, le chômeur va garder 50% de son revenu. Ça, c'est beaucoup mieux.
Oui. Honourable member for Welland.
Mr. Speaker, we've seen this all before. When the minister fails to put the concerns of consumers first, Canadians suffer. Concerns are growing over the ever-expanding beef recall. The XL Foods Lakeside plant has been decertified from exporting meat to the U.S. and is cutting shifts. Yet all we get from this minister are contradictory and unclear statements. Their regulation changes and their funding cuts are undermining faith in CFIA and may have caused a delay in the recall. When will they start providing answers to Canadian families?
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture.
Well, Mr. Speaker, Canadian consumers are always the first priority when it comes to food safety. We have hired an additional 700 new food inspectors since 2006, including 170 dedicated to the meat lines. No cuts at all, Mr. Speaker. They voted against every one of these additions. We've also, of course, I will continue to hold the food safety officials' feet to the fire to ensure that the agency responds as quickly and efficiently as is possible, Mr. Speaker.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. C'est juste n'importe quoi. Hier, en parlant de l'éclosion de colis dans l'usine à Bartane, le ministre de l'Agriculture a soutenu qu'aucune maladie est survenue dans ce dossier. Donc, pas de problème. Pourtant, des enquêtes sont en cours à 5 à 10 cas. Quand ce genre de problème survient, le consommateur devient méfiant et c'est toute l'industrie qui en paie le prix. Les États-Unis ont soulevé le problème 3 jours avant le Canada. Monsieur le Président, pourquoi le ministre se dit satisfait de la situation?
Well, as I said in the first response, Mr. Speaker, food safety for consumers is the priority for this government. Canadian food safety officials began containing the contaminated products on September the 4th, the day the outbreak was identified. We've introduced important new legislation to help CFIA respond to food safety situations like this as swiftly as possible. The NDP has already said, Mr. Speaker, they're voting against the Safe Food for Canadians Act. That's shameful.
For London Fanshawe.
Well, Mr. Speaker, once again, the Conservatives have workers in their sights. The government wants to reform pensions and potentially create a 2-tier workforce by forcing new hires to work longer than their colleagues. Besides forcing new workers into longer careers, this insidious decision could eventually lead to pay and benefit cuts. Will the Conservatives come clean? Does the minister intend to raise the retirement age of Canada's public service to 67? Yes or no?
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker, the question is about bringing public sector pensions in line with the private sector to ensure that the plans in the public sector are sustainable in the long term, Mr. Speaker. That's our goal. Now, of course, the NDP and the big union bosses don't like that. They like to complain about that. But the fact of the matter is this is the standard in the private sector. We think it's being fair and reasonable to public sector employees while being accountable to the taxpayers of Canada.
Enfin, on a un début de réponse, mais c'est encore loin d'être suffisant. Il manque beaucoup d'informations. La sécurité financière à la retraite, c'est quelque chose qui est important pour les Canadiens et on doit avoir plus d'informations. D'abord, les Canadiens ont été surpris qu'on augmente l'âge d'accès à la sécurité de la vieillesse et maintenant, on apprend que les conservateurs veulent réformer le régime de pension de la fonction publique canadienne. C'est qui les prochains sur la liste des ministres? Est-ce qu'on peut nous dire quand, officiellement, on va augmenter l'âge de la retraite pour les travailleurs, Monsieur le Président? C'est important de le savoir.
Monsieur le Président, comme j'ai déjà dit, nous avons un plan d'action économique de 2012. Nous allons avoir des changements qui peuvent examiner les fonctions publiques, bien sûr, mais en même temps avoir un système qui est plus soutenable pour le long terme, bien sûr, et ça c'est notre défi, bien sûr, mais en même temps, l'MPD et leurs alliés des syndicats veulent le statu quo. C'est pas pour les contribuables du Canada. It's not for the benefit of taxpayers, Mr. Speaker. We will be in favor of change.
The Honourable Member for Winnipeg South Centre.
Monsieur le Président, alors que le NPD appuie une taxe sur le carbone, tueuse d'emplois qui ferait augmenter le prix de pratiquement tout, notre gouvernement conservateur reste concentré sur la croissance économique, la création d'emplois et la prospérité à long terme. Le ministre pourrait-il informer cette Chambre des changements apportés à nos liens diplomatiques dans la région de l'Asie-Pacifique?
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Ce matin, j'ai eu le plaisir de présenter Guy Saint-Jacques comme nouvel ambassadeur auprès de la Chine. C'est un homme que je connais personnellement, un homme qui a toute la confiance et un homme qui saura maintenir des liens solides entre nos deux pays. Apte à parler le mandarin, il retourne pour son 4e affectation en Chine. Je sais que tous les honorables députés se joignent à moi pour souhaiter Guy et sa famille un bon tour en Chine.
Monsieur le Président, les conservateurs ne se contentent pas de démanteler 50 ans de protection environnementale dans leur loi mammouth sur le budget. Leur attitude est cavalière. Ils n'ont même pas pris le temps de consulter les Canadiens sur les changements colossaux qu'ils imposent aux évaluations environnementales. Et là, ils se retrouvent à essayer de rattraper leurs erreurs avec des consultations limitées, sur invitation seulement, des mois après que le mal ait été fait. Pourquoi le ministre n'a pas consulté les Canadiens avant de leur enfoncer dans la gorge les changements et les conséquences qui s'en suivent?
Mr. Speaker, I thank my colleague for her question, and I can assure her that she is right. We are conducting consultations widely across the country with stakeholders, with partners. In answer to her direct question, until the legislation was tabled, it would have been inappropriate for us to consult, but I can assure my colleague we are fully engaged now.
The Honourable Member for Halifax.
Alors, les changements aux évaluations environnementales affectent le milieu de vie de tous les Canadiens. Ça affecte la qualité de l'eau et de la nourriture qu'ils consomment. Tout ça sans sonder la vie de la population. Des tests sismiques, des barrages, des parcs éoliens, des centrales électriques. Tout ça peut être fait sans la moindre étude environnementale fédérale. Quand le Premier ministre disait vouloir se baser sur la science pour approuver les projets, de quelle science parlait-il? La sienne?
L'Honorable député de l'Environnement.
Well, my colleague knows full well that the deficiencies in the previous Canadian Environmental Assessment Act were well reviewed in committee in this Parliament and in previous parliaments. The improvements and the strengthening that we brought forward in SIA 2012 are there for all Canadians to see, and as we move forward, implementing the new provisions of this improved law, we look forward to input from all stakeholders and all partners.
And the honourable member from Halifax.
Well, Mr. Speaker, speaking of projects that no longer require environmental assessment, let's talk about the Oshawa ethanol plant, because until the Conservatives rammed through their bill to dismantle the Environmental Assessment Act, the project was going to be subject to a full federal environmental assessment. But thanks to the minister's reckless changes, the federal government has abandoned this process. Same project, one day it deserves environmental assessment, and the next day it doesn't. So why are the Conservatives so afraid to let communities have their say?
Exactly.
The Honourable Minister of the Environment.
Well, Mr. Speaker, again, my colleague knows full well that SIA 2012 provides for the Government of Canada and for the Environmental Assessment Agency to focus on the large and most significant projects that are being proposed across the country. The 2,000 to 3,000 plus screenings, which were in effect under the previous Act, are now the responsibility of lower levels of government, but still subject to the same strict federal environmental laws.
The honourable member for Trinity Spadina.
Well, the Conservatives are afraid of democracy. They're afraid of Oshawa City Council's rejection of an environmentally risky ethanol plant. So they took over the waterfront and appointed the buddies onto the Port Authority. They killed the environmental approval process and rubber-stamped the ethanol plant. When 300 people showed up to ask questions last night, the Conservative chair won't even let them speak.
Wow.
Why won't the Conservatives listen to the people of Oshawa? What are they afraid of?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, the NDP are always negative. They're negative about trade, they're negative about investment, they're negative about energy. Mr. Speaker, we're focused on jobs and prosperity across this country. At every turn, they're trying to stop that. And we are proud of the $10 billion our government has invested in clean energy initiatives and a cleaner environment. That's 3 times as much as the previous government. We're proud of the significant investments we've made, which are supporting renewable power, renewable energy sources across this country, and we will work to continue to develop jobs and long-term prosperity in Canada.
The honourable member for Guelph.
Mr. Speaker, U.S. inspectors caught E. coli contaminated meat at the border on September 3rd. U.S. inspectors had to inform our Food Inspection Agency we were shipping contaminated meat. It took the CFIA 2 weeks to notify Canadians. The recall keeps expanding. The U.S. have banned imports of XL Food beef, and we just learned people are getting sick in Edmonton from XL steaks. Clearly, Conservative cuts are hurting for food safety and trade. Can the minister tell us if we should continue to rely on Americans for our food safety? And will he stop trivializing the risk?
Yeah. The Honourable Minister of Agriculture.
Mr. Speaker, Canadian consumers can be assured that they are a priority for us when it comes to food safety. We've enhanced the ability, the capacity of CFIA to handle these types of outbreaks. Canadian food safety officials began containing the contaminated products on September the 4th, Mr. Speaker. We've hired additional manpower for them to get this done. We've introduced important new legislation coming up very soon, Mr. Speaker. We're hopeful the Liberals will support us.
The member for York West.
Speaker, a Towers-Watson study says years of volatile stock markets and low interest rates have made Canadians feeling very vulnerable about their pensions and their retirement. Employees are willing to sacrifice their pay, bonus opportunities, and even time off if it will secure their pensions. While Canadians are understanding more and more every day of how important pension security is, yet this government continues to slash support for the most vulnerable. Now that the government's PRPP proposal has been discredited as nothing more than a tax on the poor, when was the government going to get serious about pension security for Canadians?
Good question. The Honourable Minister of State for Finance.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I guess that's one group's opinion, but there's 60% of the workforce in Canada, Mr. Speaker, that does not have a workplace pension plan available to them right now. So we've put forward an option that provides a pension for them, Mr. Speaker, that they can contribute to. I have no idea why the opposition would actually vote against that 60% of the workforce that doesn't have an option, and the opposition said, no, that's not right. Mr. Speaker, we're moving forward with the pooled registered pension plans in conjunction with the provinces. We think that's good to help Canadians.
The honourable member for Churchill.
Mr. Speaker, despite promises from the Prime Minister to not reopen the abortion debate, today this House will vote on Motion 312 that does just that. New Democrats are the only party united that will stand up to vote for women's equality, because this is not a matter of conscience. It is a matter of rights. And Canadians have heard a lot from Conservatives and others in this House, but the question is, what will they do tonight? Will they stand up to defend Canadian women's rights?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Actually, Mr. Speaker, the NDP was part of the subcommittee that allowed this matter to come before Parliament. And so all I can tell them is if now they disagree with that or if they find this very upsetting, they should take that up with their committee member and pass that on to their House leaders.
Nikki, talk to your seat.
Le Premier ministre, Monsieur le Président, doit faire preuve de leadership. Le Premier ministre doit être clair avec son cabinet et tous ses députés. Le droit de choisir des femmes n'est pas négociable. Ce n'est pas une question de conscience, Monsieur le Président, c'est une question d'égalité et de droits fondamentaux. Est-ce que les ministres du cabinet qui vont voter en faveur de M312 vont avoir le courage de se lever et expliquer pourquoi ils veulent enlever des droits aux femmes canadiennes et briser leurs promesses électorales?
Mr. Speaker, it's the NDP who's been unclear. Again, they were part of the committee, Mr. Speaker, that allowed this matter to come before Parliament here. And that's all I can say to her. If it's very upsetting or if they disagree with that, pass this on to their House leaders and sit down with all the other issues they disagree with the NDP. Tell the House leaders what a bad idea carbon tax is, socialism. The list goes on. It's endless, Mr. Speaker. That's what you should do and report back to Parliament.
The honourable member for Scarborough Centre.
Mr. Speaker, our government has thankfully shifted the focus from that of former Trudeau-era Solicitor General Jean-Pierre Goyer, who said that it was time to take the focus off of public safety and put it on the rights of convicted criminals. Mr. Speaker, I can assure this House that our government will always stand up and put law-abiding Canadians first. Later today, this House will vote on my private member's bill, C-293, which cracks down on vexatious complaints from prisoners. Will the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety be voting for this very important bill?
Great bill. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I want to begin by congratulating the member from Scarborough Centre for excellent work on this matter. Mr. Speaker, this is a common sense goal and a bill that our Conservative government supports. It will put an end to frivolous and vexatious complaints from inmates. For example, some are complaining about the temperature of their food or the lighting in their cell. It will give officers, correctional officers, the ability, Mr. Speaker, to focus on real legitimate complaints. I would encourage the opposition, the NDP and the Liberals, to support this bill. It's common sense and it's very much needed, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Scarborough-Guildwood.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday in a fit of Napoleonic grandeur, the Minister of Defence crowned himself Advocate-in-Chief for our soldiers. Since this is a new position for him, could he start by...
Order. The honourable member for Scarborough-Guildwood.
I see that his subjects are already rising. Since this is a new position for him, could he start by telling Vice Admiral Smith that his opinion on whether or not the Ombudsman's report is or is not balanced is entirely irrelevant? Right. And secondly, could he tell the Vice Admiral that the Ombudsman's job is to advocate for his troops. And finally, while he's at it, could he go to bat for the 2 vets who've lost it?
The Honourable Minister of National Defence.
Mr. Speaker, an independent military ombudsman plays a very important role in moderating the interests of the Canadian Forces personnel and providing impartial advice. We support the Office of the Ombudsman the same way we support the MPCC, the same way we support the Grievance Board as they work within their mandate. We'll continue to do so. Our government, of course, has enormous respect for the men and women of the Canadian Forces. Unlike the member of his party who brought about a decade of darkness, we're bringing a decade of delivery.
Here. Populaires canadiens divulguent de l'information personnelle. 6 d'entre eux porteraient des attentes majeures à la vie privée. Pendant que les conservateurs sont pognés sur la vieille cassette, ça fait plus d'1 an que la législation sur la protection de la vie privée par les entreprises commerciales aurait dû être révisée. Et ça fait plus de 2 ans que les Canadiens attendent les régulations antipourrielles. Quand est-ce que les conservateurs vont se réaliser qu'on est au 21e siècle, qu'on ne communique plus par code morse et qu'on a besoin des vraies protections pour les internautes?
Madame la ministre de l'Industrie. Monsieur le Président, la loi canadienne sur les protections des renseignements personnels et des documents électroniques est prête à être déposée. Alors, si jamais l'opposition est prête à ce qu'on aille de l'avant, on peut justement la déposer puis aller de l'avant. On est prêt n'importe quand, Monsieur le Président.
The honourable member for Niagara West Glanbrook.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians are very concerned about the suffering and starvation of innocent children in the Sahel region of Africa. Almost 19 million people are affected by the food and nutrition crisis spanning the number of Western African countries. Can the Minister of International Cooperation please update this House on his recent work in the Sahel?
The Honourable Minister for International Development.
I thank the Honourable Member for their question, Mr. Speaker. World Vision is using the lunch bags that you see to encourage Canadians to donate their lunch money to the crisis in the Sahel. With Canada's support, 10 million people have received food assistance and 250,000 children have been treated for acute malnutrition. On August 7th, our government launched the Sahel Crisis Matching Fund, investing $10 million immediately to help those in need. Mr. Speaker, until September 30th, we will match every dollar contributed to a registered Canadian charity responding to this crisis.
Excellent.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
L'honorable député de Québec.
Monsieur le Président, ça fait des années que les conservateurs ont promis qu'on verrait les plans du futur manège militaire de Québec. Mais toujours rien. L'incendie du manège militaire de Québec a eu lieu en avril 2008. Ça fait maintenant 4 ans et demi que les conservateurs étirent les délais, cachent les plans et les coûts de reconstruction du manège. Monsieur le Président, pourquoi la ministre des Travaux publics refuse-t-elle de dévoiler les plans et les coûts de reconstruction? À quand la première pelletée de terre?
Well, Mr. Speaker, our government is very proud to participate in the rehabilitation of the Grand Allée Armory. We are restoring a site that we know has shaped the history of Quebec City, but also of Canada. We are supporting local jobs in Quebec City and, of course, allowing all of those to enjoy the Armory for years to come.
Here, here. The Honourable Member for Thunder Bay Superior North.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister refused to attend the Beijing Olympics, accusing China of industrial sabotage and deplorable human rights. One of his ministers called China one of the world's worst violators of human rights. Now our PM would allow Chinese communists to scoop our key natural resources. Then China bad. Now China good. Will the Prime Minister stand up for democracy and Canadian control over strategic resources and say no to this reckless Nixon deal?
Honourable Minister de l'Industrie.
As I said earlier, this transaction will be scrutinized very closely. We will work always in the best interest of Canada. And Mr. Speaker, we put in place provisions that take care of national security interests. So my colleague can rest assured that we will deal with this matter very carefully. Thank you.
That concludes question period for today. I would like to acknowledge for honourable members the 20th anniversary of CPAC, the Cable Public Affairs Channel. D'abord créé en 1992 par un consortium de 27 entreprises de câble-distribution canadiens, le mandat principal du CPAC était de diffuser sans frais pour le contribuable les délibérations de la Chambre des communes et des millions de foyers raccordés au câble. Since then, CPAC has expanded to provide continued unfiltered coverage of House of Commons proceedings and parliamentary committees, as well as a multitude of other public affairs activities across the country. CPAC occupe aujourd'hui une telle place dans la vie politique canadienne qu'il est réellement difficile d'imaginer qu'un service aussi essentiel peut ne pas exister. We have with us today in the gallery the members of CPAC's Board of Directors. On behalf of all members and indeed all Canadians, I would like to thank them and CPAC for their invaluable contribution to Canada's democratic process.